Yeah, I mean, try and see if you can, using machine learning, try to understand what I'm. These days, everything is AI, machine learning. So my name is Rexford. I'm online as Kofi KH OPHI. I am a web developer. I'm a mobile apps developer as well. I use Flutter. And I do tech stuff on YouTube. So I review gadgets and talk about tech. I'm here to talk about Firebase for production, just like any other database. Actually, this title is a clickbait. So we will only be discussing a fraction of what Firebase is. Firebase is a platform that has different aspects to it, and we'll be talking about just a few tiny bit of it in today's discussion. I will be showing some code snippets. I'm not sure it's going to be clear to see on the screen, but on your phones or your laptops, you can follow this slide when you go to this web address. It will redirect you to the presentation where you can follow on your phone or on your tablet so that you can see the code snippets if you want to. So this is basically the scope of what Firebase does. If you're building applications, they have a section for you. If you want to improve your app quality, they have other products. And if you want to grow your business as well, they've got you covered. In today's discussion, we will only be considering a bit of authentication and a bit of cloud functions. Firebase is a NoSQL. Their Cloud Firestore part is a NoSQL database. It's document storage. Now, many people have different thoughts about Firebase as to what it can do. Some still believe it's not production ready. And some even still think it's only good for logging. So you use it only to log your system updates or whatever. So I chose this title so that you can have a feel of some of the things you can use Firebase to do in production in the real world. And we'll be considering a scenario today. Today's discussion will revolve around the Firebase Admin Sdk and the Firebase Cloud Functions. Under the Admin Sdk, we will be considering what they call the custom claims. In short, the SDK is a way to allow you, the developer, to run certain sensitive tasks and code or functions not in the client. So let me step back a bit. How many of us here know about Firebase? How many of us have never heard of Firebase? Okay. I won't take your. You know, those of us who know about Firebase, how many of us have used it before? Okay. What did you use it for? Static hosting. So you use their hosting part. Okay. Who else? You?
I use cloud functions, authentication, and Firestore.
Okay, so you were basically building an app, right? So authentication and the functions and the Firestore. Okay. Who else?
So I use it for the authentication, the real-time database.
Okay.
Analytics.
Okay, so you came into this side a bit. Okay, cool. Cool. And cloud messaging. How was your experience like? It made it simpler for you, eh? Okay. Yeah, you can explain.
It made it simpler in the sense where I didn't need like back-end support.
Okay.
So I could do a lot of features without having to
Worry about your back-end then. Okay. Okay. So for those of us who've not experienced Firebase, it's like a back-end in the cloud where you have APIs and libraries to consume your backend. Basically, that's to it. The backend is it's got all these different products within the backend that you can use to improve your application. So if you want somewhere to store your data, you can use the Firestore or the real-time database. If you're looking to run functions in the cloud, you can use their cloud functions. If you want to log in users and manage authentication stuff, they have dedicated product for that. So it's a bunch of different products like combined together under a Firebase umbrella. I wanted to clear that out so that we know what Firebase is in general. Normally, when people talk about Firebase, it's easy to associate it with their real-time database and their Firestore only. But then it's a lot of like stuff packed in there. So with this admin SDK for developers, it is very important to be able to run certain sensitive functions, not on the client side. We all know that the client belongs to not only you, the developer, it belongs to whoever is the user at that point in time. So whatever you are doing on the client side, the user can also see if they want to see. And so the admin SDK allows Firebase developers to run those sensitive functions they want to handle outside the client, so that they can have it in a controlled environment where they can actually ensure security and manage it. An example would be, say, changing administrator roles. You don't want that happening on the client side, because if the client should know how to change it, they can simply make a request to the endpoint, and at that point in time, the Firebase API wouldn't know which is which in order to process your request. So the admin SDK runs in the cloud, and it can run using cloud functions, or you can install it on anywhere you want. The SDK supports Python, Node.js, and also another environment, Java. You know why I forgot Java? So yes, those are the three environments it runs in. And if you're running your own server, then you can use the admin SDK. If you don't want to spin up a server and worry yourself about, all those stuff, you can run it in the cloud functions provision that Firebase comes with. And so it's basically a back end which allows you to run custom codes. Now, under the Firebase admin SDK, there is a feature called custom claims, which you'll find under authentication. And that's what we want to talk about in this discussion. We want to see how we can use Firebase to implement a roles and permissions system in our applications. So in the real world scenario, we want to look at, we have a school management system where we have the principal, we have the class teacher, and we have the students. All these people need different permissions and roles on the system. So a principal can be, let's say, the admin. We can think of the principal as the admin. That principal sees everything and can do everything. I mean, the owner of the school should be able to do that. In other words, you could think of it as the God mode. Now, we will have a class teacher. And that class teacher will have access to whatever class assigned to that teacher and be able to manage students within that class. And then a student. The student should be able to take their tests or exams and send in their homeworks, notes, stuff related to students. So based on this, a student shouldn't have access to what a class teacher does, but a class teacher should be able to see everything like a student has. Some systems such as Django, the Django admin, comes with some of these role-based permissions built into it. So when you spin up the admin system, you have can do this, can do that, can delete, can those kind of things. How will we go about something like that in Firebase? Previously, before custom claims, it was a bit messy. So we needed the parrot to come and rescue us. And the parrot in this case is the custom claims. What the custom claims allows us to do is basically attach specific values, key value pairs, to the user's token. Every user you log in on Firebase Authentication has an ID token. And that token is basically everything you can think of about that user. So their user ID, their what they signed up with, what the details were, whether their email is verified, all those details is like passed within the ID token of a logged in user. Now in this package, that is where we can put in a custom claim, which is basically a custom key value pair that we want wherever that user's ID goes, we want that custom token, custom key value pair to go along with it. So after assigning a custom claim to a user, wherever the user logs in, when Firebase is sending the user's ID token, that custom claim, that key value pair you've attached will go along with it. Setting custom claims is straightforward. Using the Firebase Admin Sdk, we call the set custom user claims on the auth function. Now, in there, we can set in whatever value we want. So in this case, the key value is principal and true. By doing this, when we set it on the user, that means this key value will come along with that particular user anytime they log in. And that is how you go about verifying who the user is. So by setting the custom claim, after the user logs in, then you can say, if the user is a principal is true, we can go ahead to say, okay, show the user this kind of maybe user interface, or allow the user to do this functionality. So this function, this call will happen not on the client side. And that is why we need the cloud functions. So we need somewhere, a controlled environment where we can run this with peace of mind. Other than that, on the client side, somebody can mess around with things and make a call like this to Firebase to change their role from being a student to a principal. And trust me, you don't want a student having God mode. That would not be a good idea. So we run this in the cloud. Now you'll be wondering, how will we run this command? Firebase allows you to trigger this command from the client side. So in your client side code, you would only make a request to a URL. Immediately Firebase receives that URL, it will associate that URL call to a particular function. And so that function will then run, executing whatever custom claims functionality you want, or any other functionality you want to happen. It could be deleting users, it could be whatever. So before we actually go ahead to implement whatever request that comes in that we're looking to have controlled or ensure that it is being done by the right person, we can go ahead to confirm or check if whatever or whoever is making that request has the right to do it. That is important. So in this case, when that request comes in, we can decide to say, okay, whoever made that request, get the token of that person. And then let's peek into it to see if the person has a claim saying principal. Think of it this way. The principal wants to add a class teacher or assign a class teacher to a class. You don't want a student to be able to do that. You only want that permission or that role to be handled by only the principal. The school owner should be able to do that. And so we want to first check to see if whoever is making that request is the principal. And that is what is happening here. We go into the we should turn off the lights, right? Can we turn off the front row? If you're also on your phone, you can follow. I don't know whether you saw the link to. I should bring it back. This is fine. This is much. So you can see from there. Okay, that's fine. So we pick into whoever is making that call to see if the person is a principal. If the person is not, then we can abort whatever functionality we wanted to execute over there. So basically, that's about it when it comes to setting custom claims with Firebase. You add a custom claim to the user. You can go ahead to verify if the user is the right person doing the transaction or trying to execute that command. You do that, and then after the user logs in, re-logs in, the custom claim will be attached to the user's ID token. Now, you might be wondering why. Because when you log in, the ID token is sent. To update the ID token will require a re-login. And so after setting the custom claims, or changing it, or updating it, or whatever, it will be necessary for that user to re-log in before whatever changes take effect. So if you assign somebody as a class teacher, they would have to re-log in before that custom claim relating to them becoming a class teacher should take effect. And then we can use that value that is specified to do whatever we want on the client side, on the server, wherever. So now, let's take a look at some of the steps involved. The client makes a request to an API endpoint with a command to create a user with a specified role. And in this case, I'm using Angular. React, wherever you want to call it from, it will still function the same way. In this case, we want to create a user. And this function is being called by somebody who has the right to call it. We are checking that on the client side. But then remember, we are also checking it on the back end in our cloud functions. But over here, we are saying we want to create a user, and that endpoint, HTTP endpoint we want to call is this. So auth role create user. Then, calling this, we pass in the user object we want to use in creating the user. This is coming from a form on the client side. So they've entered in the name of the person, the person's email address, and whatever details they want. So you can think of this user as having user data as name, phone number, email, whatever. We pass that to the callable function here, and this is coming from Cloud Functions. So this HTTP callable will send the request using this data we have to the endpoint. That data goes okay. Now this is way tiny. Okay. In a sense, this data goes to the back end, and the back end code is going to look like this. We have the create user here, which will take in whatever data that is coming in. And if you've used Express.js before, this is pretty much Express. The Cloud function allows us to throw in Express framework so that we can use it to accept and respond to requests coming in from our client side. In this case, we take in the request, we access the body, and then pick in the data that is coming in. This data is going to have the user we sent from the client side. We receive the data, and we can go ahead to check the custom claims on the user over here. I have commented that portion out. But in here, we check it and say, is the principal actually going to make that request? Then we move ahead to execute this part, which is calling the authentication create user on the admin module from Firebase Admin Sdk to create a user. And that creates it behind the scenes. So this user is eventually being created, but not from the client side. And the user is being created after we verified all the checks we want. Is it the right person making the request? Is it okay to go ahead? After creating the user, then we can send whatever response we got. Whether it was a success or a failed transaction that happened, we can send the response back to the client side to be displayed. In this way, we have a controlled environment to ensure roles and permissions of our users of the school management system. Now, the next step is after setting the custom claim, we can then go ahead to use it on the client side anyhow we want. In this case, a real case example is using it to block users from accessing certain routes. Anyone familiar with Angular here? Okay, Angular has what they call can activate for the routing system. I think that it's the same thing. I don't know how they call it in React, where you can prevent, you check something before you navigate to a route. How is it called in React? Nobody uses React here. Yes, a room full of Angular.
There's no concept of that.
So how do you do that?
Build your own.
Really? Oh, like, are you guys serious?
Serious. 100%.
In React, but I mean React itself doesn't come with something like that. Are you guys kidding me?
React is a framework to build a framework.
It's for the gurus.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, well, in Angular there is this where you can, they call it can activate. So before a user goes to a route, you can check certain things to see if the person is allowed to. And that's what they call the can activate. So at that point in time, we can throw in the custom claims where we say if the user's custom claim is a principal, go to allow the user to go to that route. Other than that, maybe go to another place. And using the custom claims on the client side, we can partition our website in such a way that students won't even have the opportunity to see what principals see. and class teachers won't be able to also do that, but then a principal will be able to see every part of the website. This is a client-side check. So whatever we are doing here has no bearing on the server. This is just for, I think Joseph will say UX, user experience. Or you know, so? Yes, so you don't want certain things showing up to students and then they try to actually do something and you say, oh, you are not allowed or whatever. In this case, you won't be able to access that page entirely. And so on the client side, this is a typical example of how you would use a custom claim to prevent users from accessing certain parts of your web application. So this is more like a tip of the iceberg in terms of what functionality is possible. Previously, before custom claims, it was a bit, involving, trying to work around doing something like this. But custom claims now allows developers to be able to package whatever custom details they want about a user along with it. And this part we did not discuss about how you would enforce database rules when it comes to whoever access to writing whatever data on the server. That is also an entire thing on its own. Database rules to protect who can write to where and when and how and all those details. This was basically about how to set the custom claims and an example of how we can use it on the client side to actually partition our website and also enforce some checks on the back end as well. So that is it with Firebase for production. What was my title again? Aha. Honestly, I don't remember. So for extra readings, you can check functions, cloud functions, which is fantastic. Before this, you had to spin up your own server to do some of these things we are talking about because you couldn't do it on the client side. And there wasn't any solution like that. So functions took away all that, and we can now run certain sensitive processes and tasks in cloud functions. We can even do aggregation with cloud functions, which is probably something I'm going to talk about maybe some other time. People are like, you can't do aggregations in Firebase. Well, you can for production stuff. And admin under authentication as well. And we have the admin SDK. So you can find more details and examples about how these things work and read more about that. So that's it. Any questions so far? Yes? Really? I looked at it several times and it was looking at me recording. Okay, so your question is, yeah.
Is it possible to migrate it in case you want to migrate from
With the cloud function specifically?
everything that you've done?
Everything I've done here. Yes, you can implement the logic yourself in wherever you find yourself.
So you want to migrate to
Migrate exactly this.
yes.
With the functions in terms of the HTTP calls, instead of the block of code where we were using Firebase, you will write your own function which will query maybe your database to find out who has that role. And
So it means that you have to write
yeah,
yourself again.
yes, if you are not using Firebase, then you have to write it yourself. Or you want, you could. You can migrate it to another platform without using the cloud functions. But then in there, if you are using the Firebase Admin Sdk, this same code we run in the cloud functions will work there. It doesn't matter whether it's in cloud functions or it's on your own server. as long as you are using the Firebase code, like, but if you are writing your own like roles and permission-based system, then that is onto you. Like, you will have to manage it. Any more questions? Okay, no more questions means two things. Either Firebase is way easy to understand or or everyone is like lost. I hope we are not lost.
No.
Okay.
I believe the thing is, we are now going to check.
Okay, use custom claims to check. Yes, use custom claims to check. Any questions? Yes.
I want to ask that with usage of these cloud frameworks that allows building of platforms become easier for people.
Yeah.
Would you advise that new developers jump to these particular platforms? And the reason I'm asking is that they seem to be doing their work so good that it kind of shields many developers from what actually happened.
Okay.
And so you might develop for a very long time, but not necessarily know what is happening at the back end or at the server side.
Yeah.
You don't really get the logic. All you know is that there's a framework that kind of does everything for you. It makes things easier.
Yeah.
And so I just want to know, like, with that as compared to people experiencing
Okay.
the other ways.
I think I'm gonna say I will absolve myself here, the CIA star, in the sense that I can neither confirm nor deny. So it will be up to you. As in, for me, I think when I started building applications, I don't think Firebase was a thing. So I had to do things myself. But these days, for many projects I work on, unless it's a client choice or like there are other factors, whatever, Firebase is a quick go-to, like at least for many applications we find ourselves building. Some of the applications are not going to be the next Facebook, you know. And even if it becomes the next Facebook, I trust Firebase infrastructure enough to handle whatever. It's just a matter of throwing more dollars to it. At the end of the day, whether it's on Amazon, whether it's on Google Cloud, the number of dollars will determine how you can scale, provided you've built your application properly. So if the developer is comfortable using it, fine. On the other hand, it is also good to know what actually happens. I mean, if you want to be a backend developer and you have no idea how to like do authentication, like basic authentication, those things. I mean, it's, I don't know. Who are the employers here? Let's talk to the damn tech guy. Hey, why are you pointing fingers? Let's say you are employing somebody and I say I'm a backend developer, but the only thing I know how to use is Firebase. What would be your first impressions about me?
You're a backend developer, but you use Firebase.
Yes, the only thing I know how to use properly, like I spin up Firebase in split seconds.
Wait, but hold on. How are you architecting? Are you going straight from, say, the mobile app or the web to Firebase, or you are going through a server and you are doing some other stuff and using Firebase as more of a store? I build, let's say, mobile applications. I use Flutter, so Flutter is my front end, more like my front end, and then my back end. It's a gray area.
And that gray area, how will you deal with it? Now, I'm asking him because we want to hear from.
It depends on what I'm looking for. If I'm looking for someone to do, say, mobile applications that would, let's say, do something like that, I wouldn't mind.
Okay.
Because actually, there's something we're building now that we are planning to use. I want to use Firebase for.
Okay.
Because I'm also thinking that it's better to use like
something already in existence.
Rebuild some backend or something. Right? That's the whole point. I didn't like Firebase a lot.
Okay.
When initially, because I always like doing my stuff.
Yeah.
But there are certain applications where it's just a good fit.
It's yeah.
If I wanted a developer to do that, yes, would I
Okay.
call them a back-end developer? No. It's more coupled to mobile.
Yes.
Is what I
Yes.
mean. So
Yes.
that, I would expect that skill on a mobile developer. Like
Okay.
having Firebase
Okay.
experience as a
Okay.
mobile developer, I would expect that. But I wouldn't call you a back-end developer.
Okay.
Because there are different requirements.
Of course. So at least we now have. You don't know Firebase, eh? Don't worry. It's a lot of fire. So I think it all boils down to your use cases. And that is something that we need to consider a lot when we are building applications. I mean, there are some applications, it's not worth it spinning up a back end and maybe getting a DigitalOcean droplet, installing Python. I mean, why? Life can be easier. I mean, yeah, you see, for me, one thing about Firebase that is amazing is the authentication part. They've thought about it in a lot of ways that people even build their own backends, but then they plug in the authentication part. So with that authentication, you have a lot of providers, Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and you have even phone sign-ins. So it takes away a lot of like abstraction where you don't have to think about that and manage it yourself and all that, where you can concentrate on building your application and providing your solution. So it's all about, you need to weigh like.
And so probably, I'm guessing what you're trying to say is that it's good to have a fair knowledge
Of it,
of the tool,
yeah.
just so that.
But to fully call yourself a backend, you need to have an idea of like backend stuff, like real backend stuff. Not those who build Firebase are backend developers. I didn't build it, so I can't call myself a backend developer based on somebody's solution. So you should have a fair idea of what backend stuff is. So at least. Any more questions? Yes.
I wanted to talk about the authentication. That's what I tried.
Yes.
Some time back,
Okay.
right? I tried it with React and Minutes.
Okay.
And the setup was crazy.
Okay. Is it because React? Because yes, because it's because that's why you are currently. I never knew that. I never knew that you don't have like route stuff in React, which I mean I'm surprised.
It's separate. It doesn't
I mean-
package like Angular. You know, Angular brings you everything. React doesn't. You find your own and build your own.
So there are different options out there.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. So what I'm trying to say is probably you need to find something and put it in before Firebase will work as you expect. Because with Angular, it worked. It was, and no. I'm being honest. Like, sorry, I'll come. I'm being honest because I didn't have trouble. I don't know how much trouble you had, but for me, getting up to speed with authentication with Firebase wasn't much of a difficult task. It was just a matter of calling the create user with email or something and create user with something, and I get my response back. Whether logged in on create account created or not, I know I go on like it was. Wait a second. Does React have an inbuilt HTTPS module?
That's it. You bring Axios and all these things.
So what is React? What do you use it for?
Just for the rendering.
Okay. You can use React in Angular.
Yes.
Really? Then it's really tiny in terms of like the scope of from like its core base.
It's just for the components. That's it.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Because if you are telling me you don't even have HTTP in React, then it means it's like a bare bone thing.
Why is that? It's for you, right? It's all fetch.
It's fetch. It's UI.
Fetch is built in the browser. Why would I use that HTTP like
Okay, so in that case, then probably you didn't use the right HTTP module for. I don't know how to put it, but
isn't there a plugin for Angular for that? Isn't there Angular Fire?
there is is there a Firebase for React? Okay, then I think. Did you use that one?
Yeah, I use it, but the setup
Was crazy, eh? Okay, I've never seen. No, for me, Angular is. I'm a lazy developer, so I don't expect to go around fishing for things to use in my application. I pick up Angular, HTTP is there, routing is there, and that was one of the difficulties with Angular 1. We had challenges when it comes to routing. That was how come UI router came to save it. Angular 2 onwards, it was built in. It makes Angular heavy in terms of like when you build even a hello world in Angular, relatively it's big. But all of these come together that if you're building an application that it's going to be like big relatively, you have all of that thrown in where you don't have to worry about Axios or whatever routing thing to throw in. I mean, so I would go and check specifically how the React part with Angular with Firebase happens. It's I don't know, but because I've tried Flutterfire as well, seamless. I've tried. So I think no, probably it's something else maybe. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I mean.
So there's RX file. So if you don't use RX file, the setup is pretty hot. It was really a similar thing when I came around. I compared because I was doing Angular and I saw this RX file like let's try.
The RX file is for React.
React Angular.
Okay. Okay.
So they say according to the documentation, based on what they learned from Angular file, they decided to build RX file so that whether you're using Angular or
Okay. Okay. You can still have one.
But then with RX file, it's 10 minutes. Like 10 minutes, we're doing Google Authentication.
Okay. Okay.
Password. That's what we're working on this. It's great. It's like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Then I don't think I've heard of the RX file. I'll have to check it out.
So the documentation is not so straightforward, but if you have someone with Angular background, because then you have to use observables and then
Yes.
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 That's
Yes.
what we need to learn. We need to understand
How the observe and subscribe thing. Okay. Okay. I'll be waiting for RX Ghana. Because it appears there's RX for everything now. Yeah. I would say with NoSQL or document storage, one of their things is there is no schema. Throw whatever you like at it, except remember to query the right thing at the end of the day. If you don't have a schema and you're throwing anything, it means you would have to have a way of knowing what you've thrown in to query properly. So in that case, I think by default, Firebase doesn't have a schema system. I don't know if they do. Like, I've not seen anything like that. Firestore has a schema. Something. How does it? It's different from database rules, though. The Firestore comes with real-time database for one thing, did not have, I think, querying,
Yeah.
which was like one requested feature. So I think Firestore came with query and indexing and like a lot more features. I am not sure about the schema. Well, if it exists, I've not seen it yet. I know of the rules, database rules, where you can enforce like your database structure and who can write to where and how. But schema specifically, I've not seen anything like that. In my case, what I'm thinking is, if you are building something in Angular or in Flutter or in React, you can have a schema system on your client side in your application. Angular has model kind of approach where you can model your data and then communicate through that back and forth so that you can actually enforce what is going out and what is coming in terms of what the data structure is, which would streamline it. But having a schema at the back end would make it easier in terms of you don't have to write a model system on the Angular. If you have Firebase, Flutter, you also have to write your model system. So in terms of schema, I haven't seen something like that yet. I haven't heard anything about that yet, whether they would want to do something like that. It would be interesting, like it would be nice if there was a schema structure. For Firebase, what they'll tell you is flatten your data. Like whatever question you ask, it's like jQuery being an answer to almost everything in the universe. You tell them you have a problem with your data structure, blah, 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 flatten your database. Yeah.
I think the second part of the question, when someone signs up, what you can do is that maybe in Cloud Store. So Cloud Store, it looks very much like what you do in MongoDB. So there are collections and there are documents. So then when you sign someone up and you want to take maybe another custom data besides maybe email and password, what you do is that when you create, when the data is successfully created in the authentication side, Cloud Store.
That's even what is happening here.
What you do, let's say, if you had a promise, so when the promise is lost, and then what you do is that you create a new document in the user's collection. What we can now work on this way. When someone signs up, we create a new document in the user's collection. So what I'm saying is that where your Firebase keeps your sign up users is different from the main
Authentication.
So you can't add maybe extra things. For instance, if you're using email and password, you can't take email, password, probably address, and keep them there. All that Firebase you want to save the email and password.
Yeah.
So if you need to save extra data on your user, for instance, an address, for instance, what you a simple trick is that immediately the user is created, Firebase will return to a user ID. So you could then go and create the user's collection.
Yeah.
So in that user collection, in the user's collection, you could now create a new document and set a Firebase has a keys.
Yeah.
Every document has a unique, I forgot how it's called in MongoDB. It has a unique
UUID or something. Is it the UUID?
User ID as the key of the new document that
Yeah,
you
wrapping up, yeah.
So by that one, you have a good relationship. So every time you do your current users, the user ID, you go to your users collection and fetch the data that you saved there.
So in summary, you can't add anything to the authentication response that comes from Firebase. It is off limits. The only thing you can add is the custom claims. And it has to be a key value pair. And it shouldn't be more than, I think, 1,000 bytes or something. They even have a limit on that. So you can't store your entire user profile in using the custom claim. As he explained, put that to store that somewhere else under a user's collection or something. Fintech products. I think I think there is a regulation. There is a term for it that currently Firebase doesn't support. They have a word for it. I've read where financial institutions, as you are saying, they have a kind of compliance but Firebase says they don't comply. AWS, I think DigitalOcean, they all have those compliance, but Firebase in particular doesn't have that. It's a financial something. I think so. Yeah. Yes. So I think Firebase doesn't. I don't know why it doesn't comply yet, but depending on, you might have to check from the Firebase doc to see exactly what they support and not. But I don't know if they fixed it. The last I checked, you couldn't build certain financial applications with Firebase. And so people were complaining that when are they going to support it? I don't know exactly what, but yeah. So that's it with Firebase for production. Mine click big title. So that's it. I'm sure there's no more questions, so just wrap it and then.
If you have any questions, you can talk to Mark.
Yeah. And then for my shameless plug, which he has advised me to. I won't say anything.
So he has a YouTube channel. What's the name of your YouTube channel?
It's called Kofi.
He has a YouTube channel called Kofi, and you all can subscribe to him. He talks about technology in Ghana. He talks about stuff that he does there, stuff that he bought, reviews products. So just subscribe so that he can get more subscribers, so that somebody can come and pay him some money so he can get paid for it rather than doing it for free. There you go.
Check this one. Okay, C. Okay.
Yes, that's their YouTube shorthand for. The C is for channel, so.
Yeah. So that's it. So thank you, Rexon. We're going to take a short break. The food is supposed to be coming. They said it's been coming from about an hour ago. It's definitely coming. But for now, we'll just take a short 5-minute break so everybody can switch their leg and then we'll get the next speaker out.
Andrew, I can turn it off?
Yeah, man.
If you guys did not take anything from this discussion, at least subscribe. Subscribe and click the bell icon. If you don't click the bell icon, the subscription is not complete. The custom clip.